It's just amazing. It's just amazing. You get up at 5 in the morning, you come out to the yard. My tentatively new mama robin is sitting on her nest. The weather is supposed to be absolutely beautiful for this weekend. The fish are as hungry as can be. We're going to be getting our plants this week. And I'll tell you, if you've never had a cup of coffee, I know Kent Tyser has, among other people. If you've never had a cup of coffee out on this deck early in the morning and listened to the birds, and then loaded up the car and gotten ready to go flying, it's quite an experience. And just knowing, any day now, we're going to have baby robins. Anyway, hear them chirping in the background? We're off to the flying field. We have the carbon fiber tank in a plane and it's ready to test. This will be our third tank test. Yeah, I just guess if you live in a part of the country where it's warm and summery and friendly all year long, well, somehow you don't have the level of appreciation, I guess, that I do. After going through a long, hard, harsh winter, to know that spring is in the air and we're only a week or so away from our planting, our baby birds, our robins. This backyard, look at the wisteria up here. I guess my friend in Sweden, Ramo, I guess every country has a different time of year that just everything starts to bloom and blossom. And we are in that time right now. And of course it's always nice after a nice cup of coffee. Well, that coffee just tastes good today. Be heading down to the flying field, meet Rich and John, or we got a motor to break in actually today too. I'll explain more later, but we want to test that carbon fiber tank. Today will be carbon fiber test day. Now with the carbon tank in there, carbon tank is just a little bit smaller, so I don't know if we're going to run tight on fuel, but we'll do the thing we always do, a square one test. The plane, actually, we've gotten 2 ounces out of the nose now. It should turn significantly harder. May have to retrim, readjust, not sure what. We're going to find out right away. And it looks like, if I am reading the weather report right here, we're probably going to be in for a real nice flying day. Now, comparing these 3 tanks is what I want to ultimately do. I want to ultimately be able to make a little data sheet, have all 3 of these tanks tested, shimmed, have their tubing, so I can plug and play if I want to change it, if I need to go to a bigger tank, a smaller tank, or whatever. I want to be able to do that, and I want to be able to do it relatively quickly and efficiently too. So that's the goal we have here. And the safest thing here is I'll get 2 or 3 flights on this. Needle should be pretty much the same. It's not a lot different in shape than Joe's tank, although when you plumb a tank differently, Joe plumbs it just a little bit different than I do. Sometimes you can get different characteristics where with a Uniflow tank there can be a flat spot right in the middle of the flight or at the end. You never know until you fly it. You get 100 flights on it and then figure it out. And we of course have to get the shim exactly right. That is really critical with this to get the motor run that we're looking for. What I'll do is I'll set up the other camera as soon as the sun comes out. See, with this amount of sun, you're just looking at a black background with a red plane. So as soon as we get a let's hope the sun comes out. It's not doomsday or something. This is absolutely true. I take my little warm-up flight, make sure the needle's set, and clip a bird with the lines. Now he flew away, but boy, it really made me feel bad this morning that I'm not sure he even knew what hit him, but he managed to fly away. So anyway, we're testing. These are all the flights that I can pull off of this tape. Sun is not out yet, but I wanted to get some before the wind came up or before the other guys get here and start doing their thing. jug up, so it was about a half a gallon of fuel. The carbon tank looks like it's shimmed pretty close, and I made a little gauge where the tube is, a la Frank McMillan. I'm going to show that hopefully on a video soon, or if not when we go to Texas. Frank had a great way of doing this. The thing I have yet to resolve, and I think what it is, when I took Joe's tank out, normally a metal tank, the first day you run it, you shake some rust out of the filter. A carbon tank is different. Sometimes you don't get anything. Sometimes you get one big chunk of epoxy. Sometimes, and it's clean as a whistle. You never know. But until I go home and clean the filter, I won't know that. But then after the first day, as soon as I see another day that the filter's coming out clean, then I know I'm done. I hope I'm done. Every time you say that, you know you're not done. So anyway, this was a pretty good test session. And there's a couple other things I got to do to them. I'm actually going to wait till Rich gets here because I want to break the motor. And what we're going to do is put a 77 in the Strega that he drove over with a car. And of course, Richard was out of motors, so what we did is we got Les's motor, and he'll replace Les's motor, but it still needs to be broken in and make gaskets and bend the needle valve and get an hour of runtime on it before we put it in a Stuka. And of course, he's got a brand new door and prop. I've got to pitch the prop. So we got a couple days of work, but hopefully by the weekend or so, he'll be seeing how he likes the 77 in that new Stuka. So anyway, it's a pretty good session. I'm not unhappy with this at all. This was a good one. And I'm still not sure what the issue is with again, I'm thinking about that it could possibly be some stuff in a filter, a pinch in a fuel line, or a little pinhole in a fuel line. Something crazy. But as soon as the plane takes off, and this is why I recorded all those flights with the other camera, what I wanted to do is, I wanted to see, quiet birds, can't even talk with these seagulls. What I wanted to see for myself was if that's going to be the resolve, or if there's a chunk of epoxy in that, because it's a brand new tank, of course, hasn't been run yet. But the run character is exactly what I wanted. I just wish I could mend. You know, I'm going to try to make a tank with some little compartment on the side or something. Another 1/8 of an ounce would do it for me. But in the meantime, if that doesn't work, one of the choices I have, just add a head gasket or go down one size on Venturi. Go down. There's a 325 now. Go down to 320. That'll give me 4 or 5 extra laps. Anyway, this was quite a session. So while we're waiting for Mr. Jacobone to get here, he's got business issues to do. This is Les's brand new motor. First thing, of course, we have to do is make some gaskets for the exhaust. Luckily, I didn't forget to put a little bit of this good gasket material. This, I think Frank McMillan was the one that told Les about it, and Les got it, but let's try to give the credit to the right people here. Anyway, and there's the new 70s. Whoop! Now John, while I'm setting this motor up, John just had a good experience that reminded me. He put the battery in the pocket with his keys. I did that at the circle burner field one day, and I smelled something burning. I said, what the hell's burning? It was me. It caught my pants on fire. The keys was smoking. You can't imagine. I think that's still on video. In fact, Carlos was shooting video. He said, look, Wendy's on fire. It's true though, if you have a battery and you don't put that cap on it, which I don't, I leave the batteries in my box, but they never are capped, and every once in a while I happen to touch one, and that's the end of that. Anyway, we got Richards, which is now Richards. It has Les Demet written on it somewhere, he said. He said it did anyway. I'm not sure it is. We'll find out, but get it out of the bag. The biggest thing when you set up a new motor is getting the gasketing on the exhaust. Getting that right, that's the hardest part to get right, and get the screws all torqued down and everything. So that's the objective of the day, and then we'll get it broken in for him. He'll be ready to put in a Stuka by this afternoon. All right, so what we're doing, first thing with every Roadjet is that material, again, it's sticky back and it sticks. And then a brand new blade to cut that gasket out, and that is kind of an important thing, I think, just in terms of keeping everything neat inside the nose of the plane. I know people that run it without a gasket, nothing bad seems to happen, but it's just a little bit neater this way, and it's a little, of course, thanks to Frank McMillan. I think he he found this. Again, I don't really remember, but Les bought it. I think Frank was the one turned him onto it. And we had used this green stuff that Perfect makes, and I had gotten some stuff from other sources that didn't work anywhere near as well as this. This is the stuff. And if you're gonna do, you know, a relatively high-end engine, I just can't see any reason not to get every accessory right on it. Okay, now I don't know what kind of material. This is the old header and the old, that's got a year or two, maybe more, of flying on it, but here's what I wanted to show. Whenever I take a plane apart, I look for little places like this where things are rubbing. Now this is the corner of his tank rubbing on the header. And that's not a good thing. So we want to make sure when he puts this back in the plane. Now if you had to, you could take a little ball peen hammer and just tap this very gradually so that wouldn't hit. In fact, we may do that. I'll tell him to do that. But see, having a good gasket, you're always going to get some of this because some of it comes from the prime spitting back when the motor's 2-cycling, 4-cycling. You get a little dot, but you don't get this giant amount that Rich has got on this one. So I'm going to pull this all apart, clean that surface off with some 1200 sandpaper, and then put the new part on with the new gasket. Now here's one of the things that I've seen other people have issues with road jets. All the screws are 540, and people that aren't machinists or don't know what's really happening here, they put a 440 in here, tighten it, and strip it. It'll tighten to a point, but make sure, especially if you don't get the header from Richard. Richard, I know, sends the right screws, but if you buy the header from a hobby shop or something, you never know if they're going to give you the right screws. And a lot of times they don't. They just give you 440s. A PA is 440. A PA does not switch. Those screws don't go in there. Now, I remember when Les built this bench, this break-in bench, and I kept thinking, oh man, that was a lot of work. Well, it was. But boy, have we used it successfully. We've broken in probably many motors for customers. 4 strokes and 2 strokes. And I got a break-in prop that was a 4-blade that was chipped. It's down to about 12 inches in diameter. This will be a good prop to break the engine in with. We will get a gallon of fuel through here. Maybe a little more, a little less. 1 tank at a time, let it cool between runs. Now, just as the motor is totally broken in, who shows up? Just in a nice clean clothes, all nice and clean. Oh my God. He's got his prop. Is that the Doran's prop?
This is the communist prop.
I put that in a van. I'll set that up for you. Tomorrow we fly to Stuka. We fly on the Stuka tomorrow. The man knows how to get here just in the nick of time. All right, so the deal is I'll do the prop today. You're gonna come out in the morning?
Yeah.
And you need a piece of that stud material, but if you could tell me the length, a lot easier to cut it at the shop than cut it at the field here. Even with a hacksaw, it's a bitch. And nobody carries that. You can't buy it in a store anywhere. Or you got the other choice, you just put it in Strager.
I'd rather see it in the Stuka.
Well, whatever, you know.
Because
Get some time on it. Just get a day of running, even if tomorrow's a crappy day.
Well, that's all set up.
And you'll be ready to go, you know, after a couple of days, you'll be ready to go to Texas.
Power. That's what Popkieski said.
What happened is we had a very unique thing happen with the carbon fiber tank. And no matter, you know, How this ultimately resolves, I don't know. We didn't have a single thing in a filter, but what I did, of course, is I put a different glow plug in. Now, not a brand new one that I know is proven. And what I have is, I have a box. All the parts that I've tested, a bag actually, with the bigger Venturi. We have the smaller one in there now, a 210. A filter that we know has been in the plane, cleaned many times. In the Spitfire. Now, what I do is when I have glow plugs that have 20, 30 flights on them, put a new one in. Now I know these are proven parts. These are not make-believe parts. I also put the smaller of the two Venturis that I've been using in this motor in. This is a 210. I checked, for instance, these are the things I check for, and I've had a dent that little, remember I showed on Richard's motor, denting that little back on the header with a little ball peen hammer and grinding some of this away. Well, it still rubs on there, but it's not rubbing on the tank. That's a little piece of asbestos I have in there just to cushion that a little bit. And a little piece of Roasil foam to keep the carbon from wearing into the fuselage side here. What I'd like to do is be able to move this side over, but then the vent hits the... I have to remember if I make another tank to get that vent as far over as possible, or it rubs on the side of the motor. Now keep in mind, everything up in the front of this plane is really, really tight. This really comes together like a, well, like a Ducati. If you've ever pulled a fairing off a Ducati and you see how many pipes and wires and everything are all in a small area. So what I want to do now, I'm going to put it all back together, making sure I use my gauge to get me back to where I was before. I've been safety wiring all the pipes. Put a zip tie on and safety wire too. That's worked just perfectly. Pipe's perfectly dry, not one drop on it, and that just makes maintenance easier. We've got our wood 14.6 Riva, 14.5 I'm sorry. Pretty well chewed up from being in the parking lot, and you can see where the stones have hit it, and every time I take it off I rebalance it, re-etch the hub, make sure that's, I'm not getting a slippery, wet, oily piece of wood there, especially when this engine bumps, and you can see it can really get very, like Godzilla, I guess is the right word. But here's the things that I really was appreciating about the plane. It is absolutely dry in there. There is not a drop of anything anywhere, and most important, there is not a drop anywhere in the back of the plane. With those twin exhausts, that whole back, I don't even have to wipe it off. Now here's the repair. I'm going to buff that out and see if it needs any more clear where the flap was broken. And probably, well, if I do get all the maintenance done today and get all set up back to go to town, what I think will be worth doing here is I always like to take things apart and double check them and make sure I'm not getting too cute, because anything that's rubbing, anything that's oily and leaky, the sooner you can find it, the less of a problem it is. And this is just an old habit from motorcycle days of whenever you have this kind of operation, pull it apart, look for things that are rubbing and wearing, clean it all up, put it back together. And it's that maintenance that makes, I think, just it maximizes the time that you have at the field that you're not doing maintenance. Now so far we've never had to do maintenance on this at the field, so even though it does come apart pretty easily, but the idea is, oh, I wanted to show that little tank shim thing. What I did was, Frank McMillan did, I measured this from Joe's tank with a micrometer, pretty much the same height tank, measured the vent where it was. And I knew I needed to shim Joe's tank about a 1/16, so when I put this tank in, I added a 1/16 to that dimension, and it looks real close. Now, the unfortunate thing is I shot over an hour of video with the other camera, and because it's so dark, it's basically unusable and out of focus, and it isn't the kind of thing that you can really do much with, but I could hear the motor run. So after playing it, looking at the motor run, I've made myself pretty convinced that we're very, very close on a tank shim, and that's going to be a big thing for the next fly-in session. So without saying anything, I want to get this all buttoned back up, because planting day is coming. Karen has reminded me. It's planting weekend here in New Jersey. And it's so nice that the back of this model stays clean, or else I'd have to pull that tail section out. Actually, the last time I took the back out, there was not one drop of oil. In fact, I had to oil my linkage. It didn't even get oily. Now this is the wet sanding. This is the panel that's been repaired. This whole area out here has been repaired. The flap in here, oh no, it's on the other side. That actually didn't work out too bad, so we'll have it all buffed back out and hopefully be back on a field now, the next couple of days, tomorrow even. But what I wanted to do is I want to take my little database out and record all the data I have on these fuel tanks, because it's a significant, a fuel tank, people think a fuel tank is just a fuel tank. You just buy it in a hobby shop and put it in a plane. Anything but that. A fuel tank does so many things, and it does them all at the same time. Now if I could teach a fuel tank to answer the phone, I'd have it made. Now the last thing I have to do here, put some wax over this. I don't want to get fuel stains on it. That buffed out is, that'll be fine. I don't even have to worry about it. Now because I had wiped this whole plane down with M600, I want to re-wax it, get it back up to where it's good and shiny, and then I want to balance up Rich's prop. And we'll be pretty much ready for, I hope he's going to get some flights on the Stuka in the next day or so. And Rich Oliver's be sending up a whole bunch of props to test. And we'll also have, well, we're going to have this prop to test on Rich on the 77 that he's putting in his Stuka. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to do in the next couple days. Now before we get ready, load up the truck for what we hope is going to be a good day tomorrow, I wanted to get prop ready for Rich. And this is Doran's latest. I wanted everybody to see this. This is one of the really nice ones. Let's get the paper off it. Now Doran, for all the time that we've spent with Doran, and I'm impressed with a lot of things about Doran's props. First of all, they're light. Second of all, they're nice and accurate. Now, I had suggested a while back that what Doran would want to do is put some cross grain out at the tip. He did that. He made me some prototypes. He also made, now if you can look at this up close, we're going to balance it. He's got a woven, looks like 2 ounce, right in the mold. Boy, that looks nice. Now, anytime we get these, of course, the thing is, they don't come balanced. They're very, very accurate, but they need to have all the blades radius. So before I even touch this, before I even get to where my hands are going to be touching it, I like to take some sandpaper and get all the little razor edges. Now, Doran demolds these pretty well, better than a lot of other prop manufacturers, but you still have to demold them. You have to get these razor edges. Anything carbon fiber, if one little piece sticks up, boy, it can really be a pain. And then we'll take it over to the bench. Now when we go to balance them, we want it, and again I'll show it real quick, but we want to take as much of the material off the back as we can and as little off the front. I want to leave the airfoil and keep this flat on the back. And these are constant pitch props. Now I've found one thing. In the conditions we have up here, when the air is really nice, in what I call the flyable air where everybody's at the field, these props are just deadly good. The thing that I don't have is a setup for these props, because I need to get a couple more from Doran, and I need to pitch them up and down a little bit till I get one that's going to work in the wind real well. But just as they come out of the box, in anything that an average person would want to fly in, right out of the box with a 77, these are ready to go, full 14-inch pitch. Now normally I get a prop and I want to find the heaviest blade. And obviously that's the heavy one. That's the heaviest of the three, it looks like. In fact, what it's telling me is this one and this one are heavy. This is the light one. That's right. Okay, so this is now the light one. This is the light blade, so I can just take an ink marker put an X on it. That's the light blade. It means these two are going to have to be sanded. This just allows me to do this a little quicker. So these two are about the same. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have to take the two other blades and just take some material off the back. I like to try to do this with as rough a sandpaper as I can get in the beginning, because I need to take material off. Now I know that's the light blade, so I can start with, let's start with this one, and just with a sanding block try to get as much of it off the back as I can. Now Rich's plane, because of that big cowling and a big canopy, it's a pretty draggy plane, so it may need a little more pitch. And I'm not going to adjust the pitch right now. What we'll do is fly the plane, see how much more pitch it needs. I have a gauge, of course, so we'll see. Now at some point it gets closer and closer, but there's always the heavy blade that needs some material taken off of it. And no matter how, yeah, I like to get it that no matter where you put it on the station, it's perfect. And as I said, if I can, especially on door and sprouts, get as much off the back with a sanding block. If you need a little off the front, well, but most of it off the back seems to work the best. Now if you read it in all three stations, and it's pretty that's pretty good. Okay, now the other thing that's important, any motor, what am I talking about, any big bore, is to get the engraving tool. And I always engrave this front and back with a star pattern. And that is really, to get a grip on there, that's really important. I think that's very important. In this case, now we have to make a stud because Rich has an extension unit, which I'm not in favor of, neither is Rich Oliver, but he has an extension unit on this plane, so I don't know if this is going to mate up. We're going to have to look at how that goes together when we're at the field. Now, one product I was really happy with, and this was from Bob Brooken's recommendation, 3M product. If I remember right, this was $30, $33, $35. But the purpose is now, this is relatively new paint. This is where we touch this up. And I just want to get a quick, I'll call it an appearance shine on it. Nothing too special. And it's important in my case that when I have these touch-ups, and you've seen the touch-ups on here, that I can get them blended in as well as possible without making a major production. If we're in the middle of the winter, I could just, you know, do this a lot slower and methodically. I'm trying to do a quick and dirty repair here. And what I found works really well, and this is a Kent Ticer trick. This material is called Finesse It. And these are microfibers that you can buy in any car supply store. Now keep in mind, this is relatively new paint and it's a touch-up all at the same time. But that Finesse It does a nice job. I think that's about as good as that's going to get for a quick and dirty touch-up. Now, this is kind of a little bit tricky to figure out. Let's take this is the any ship, and it wouldn't matter what ship. There's going to be a horizontal CG location. There's also going to be a vertical CG, and we hope, if everything worked out well and the plane was perfect, these two would meet right at the CG, right in the middle of the wing. Well, it doesn't always happen exactly as planned. So what happens when the vertical CG is wrong? You can add or subtract from the length and weight of the landing gear. That's one thing. To get the plane to balance properly, you can move the lead outs, as Rich Oliver, among other people, have done. But you'd like to have all these things come together. Now, in the case of the fuel tank, and this is what I want to be pretty clear about right now. What I don't like to have happen, the thing that I try to avoid at all costs, is putting weight up on the spinner. Because the spinner is rotating, and it adds some negative effect to the way the plane flies. It's always better if you could add the weight up under here. I've added lead if I had to add a ½ ounce or whatever. Now, look at this for a minute, because this is important to understand. Let's just make an example up, and I'm trying to make a simple example. If we knew a plane was bottom heavy, in other words, the wheels were heavier, this side was heavy, and at the same time, it was nose heavy, now you'd want to figure out, where do you want to take the weight off of? Well, in this case, if the wheels are heavy, you'd like to take some of the weight off down here, if there was some weight to take off. Now, if the plane was top heavy, in this case, a lighter spinner would kill two birds with one stone. It would move this CG forward, and it would get weight off at the top. So here's what typically happens. When a plane is bottom heavy and you put a lighter spinner on, it gets even worse. Or when it's bottom heavy and you lighten up with a carbon fiber tank that's above the CG. Or the reverse of this. In other words, you always want to make a determination when you want to. First off, here's the thing from years ago that didn't work. This would be something that, and I could attest to this, just wrapping solder on a tail wheel. Well, it moves this CG further back. It also moves this further down by some amount. And it would start to get to where, yeah, the benefits didn't outweigh things. I remember the Red Baron was a good example of a plane that really had an awkward CG. And you would add a heavier spinner and this CG would get right, but now it was wrong top and bottom. So, but here's the point. I don't want to use the weight on the spinner to adjust the plane. I'm pretty much locked into liking this 77 Rojet. So that eliminates all these, and the two things that are left, the prop and the tank. Now I went by and made because the prop is way above the CG, I went by and made a real accurate list of all the props that we're ever going to put on a 77. Keeping track of which are the lightest, which are the heaviest. The Rev Up 14.5 is the lightest. So what that does, it gets weight not only off the nose, it also gets it off the top half of the CG. Now both of those in combination mean, well, that's the direction we'd like this to go in. We'd like to get weight off of the front and off of the top, if possible. So let's start with the easy ones, the tank. We have Rich Oliver's tank, the bottle tank. That was 52 grams, if I remember right. I could be off a gram or two. We have Joe Adamusco's steel tank. That's 72 grams. And we have the carbon tank that's in the plane now. These are all within a ½ ounce of each other, even though the carbon is a little bit smaller. And this is 22. So you can see we have about an ounce difference, and roughly an ounce. An ounce is close enough. So we have three choices of nose weight here. When we want it to be really nose heavy, medium, or we want that as hard cornering as possible. Now, the only quirk we've had so far with Richard's tank, and I was really anxious to try this tank, was we can't shim it close enough to the mounts. We're already into the mounts, and because of the shape of the tank, the shim is the issue the limiting, I call it the limiting factor, is we can't shim that closer to the mount. And that's a problem with all non 1-inch tanks. Now, oh, I'm sorry, that's this one here. That's Richard's tank. Joe Adamusco's tank, we shimmed the 16th. Let me just make a list here. Can't shim it properly. And I talked to Rich about the possibility maybe at some future time of heating it and putting it in a vise, something like that. But for right now, that's the limiting factor. That's the reason that didn't wind up in the plane permanently. Now this tank, and it was just the other day I had this issue, that the plane would sit in a stooge and it would run, and I got this on video, but the video, it's so dark you can't see the video. The plane would sit in a stooge and run rough. As soon as it took off, it was fine. And I assumed it was something in the filter or the plug, something simple, but I really don't have it resolved yet. And until I have it resolved, maybe the next time we're at the field, when it's sitting in a stooge, the tail end is up a ½ an inch, and I think it might just alter the fuel flow to the engine. As soon as it takes off and gets level, it's fine. So where we are right now with this is we have 3 choices. Each one of the tanks that I have the shim that's going to go in it, and each one is in a plastic bag. I have the shims both top and bottom. It's in a plastic bag. This one is now in the airplane for the next day of testing. But if I want to swap these at Texas or at the field or whenever, all 3 will have, this would be the scenario. You'd have the tank, whatever shape that is, the tubes that go to it with the filters all cut, ready to go, tubing on both of the vents, the shim that would go between the mounts if there was one, and in this case there's a large shim that goes up into the tank floor. So having all of this in a plastic bag, this really gives me trim choices, and it gives me trim choices without putting anything on the crankshaft. And one of the things a lot of people don't appreciate, 2-bladed prop. Let's just make this real simple, and this is not the defining thing, but just to have an idea of it. If you have 2 things that happen. The biggest one is the diameter of the prop that loads the motor. The total diameter is what almost always determines how the motor performs, how it loads the motor. Bigger and bigger and bigger up to a point, get better and better and better, but then at some point you need landing gear that look like a praying mantis or some other thing. We've settled in on the fact that this engine is happy with a 14-inch prop. Now, when you go to a 3-blade, whether it's Doran's or Bryan Ethers, usually and typically, except for Doran's prop, that would come down, let's just say, to 13.5. Well, yes, no, maybe. Except for Doran's prop being a constant pitch, it lets the motor unload a lot more, so you can run, in this case, a full, and Richard's going to do it tomorrow on his. Now, we also found, and I found this out, I had some Bryan Ether 4-blades, and I had cut them down at one point in time to 13.5 and 13.25, and down to about 13 is where they were working good. But Doran's 4-blade runs at a full 14, except it really loads the motor. So what happens is when you're running this setup, and Richard's not going to do this, as you're running a setup, a prop that loads the motor more and more and more, you need to run all of the things that make more horsepower. Bigger venturi, higher compression, more nitro, all of those things that contribute to dealing with the prop load. Or in this case, what we're doing right now is we're trying to go in the other direction. I'm trying to have a very light prop load, mild compression, a medium-sized venturi, and of course the 10% fuel. Now this, what we're looking for here is a combination. And it seems like we're real close already having something that I think is worth saving. This is a combination I'm going to want to keep. When I get something that works relatively well, I call it a keeper. Now, for me, a keeper is, this is a 14.5 rev-up wood prop, and I have more of them coming from Richard and the carbon. The prop being light gives me the CG advantage. It allows me to run the motor milder. medium compression, medium Venturi, and 10% fuel. Now Richard in Texas, when it gets hot, runs 15%. He can run bigger and bigger 3 blades than I can. I'm not sure if he's experimenting with 4 blades, but for the next week or so, we're going to try to work with this combination and this CG combination and try to really get this flying as well as it can, so that when we actually get to Texas, we have something to start with. It'll be our square one setup, and we won't have to fiddle the whole first day away with the plane doing maintenance. I'd like to get as much of this developed up here under very friendly, easy conditions. Now, one other neat thing, I thought this was, may or may not happen by the time we get to Texas, I'm not sure. We were hoping we were going to have these wheel pants finished, but the problem is this time of year we're busy making pipes and tanks and... No, I just got an email today. Gerald Shan. Okay, so what we're going to try to do in the first part of this test, start with the square one. We'll get one or two flights just to make sure that's where we left off the day before. I don't know if you can hear this, but we got a goose on top of the trailer truck judging these.
That's Helen O'Connell.
Now, what I wanted to do after this session, because we have a pretty crappy day out there, I wanted to see a couple of things. First off, what I did, I hopefully